Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. Thank you all for joining us today for this important conversation about how Social Security works for people with blindness and low vision. My name is Janice Barocas, and I'm honored to welcome you on behalf of the Task Force for Empowering Blind Independence. The Task Force is a Georgia nonprofit established in 2024 to identify and address gaps in the blindness and low vision ecosystem. Two of the task force's core goals are to serve as a convener and a trusted knowledge hub, bringing together professionals, community members, advocates, and people with lived experience to share timely, relevant knowledge and foster collaboration. The task force was built to spur solution focused conversations and innovation. To that end, this summer, we will launch a 12-week pilot program called the Access to Technology Help Desk. In today's digital first world, technology is constantly updating and changing, and people who rely on specialized access technology need someone they can call for technical assistance on frequently asked accessibility questions. The Access Technology Help Desk will be staffed by interns from World Services for the Blind in the final stages of their Access to Technology instructor program. And so stay tuned for more details on that in July. Like technology, today's topic, Social Security, is one that generates many questions and concerns for job seekers and employers alike. So, we are especially grateful to have an expert from the Social Security Administration here today. And it's my pleasure to welcome our presenter, Ms. Anise Norman, who is a public affairs specialist with the Social Security Administration for the Georgia area. She has generously agreed to spend her time with us today to discuss Social Security programs and work incentives that matter for people living with blindness and low vision, and to answer questions from our community. So we really appreciate her willingness to share her expertise and knowledge in a way that makes it more accessible, more understandable. And shout out to a low tech strategy, the way Miss Norman and I connected. Um, I sent her a letter with a stamp on it to her physical address in downtown Atlanta. And within days, got a phone call, email, and that started the conversations that brought us to today. So, as a matter of housekeeping, we love questions, but I'm going to ask that folks hold those until the end to give Ms. Norman a chance to share her slides, do her presentation. And with that, I will turn it over to Ms. Anise.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Anise Norman, Public Affairs Specialist in the Georgia Area Director's Office. Just very quickly, I've been with the agency. I think I was just thinking here, coming up next month, I'll have 30 years of government service, and I started my career as a claims representative, taking the SSI claims for individuals. I started out in South Carolina. I was there about 4 years, and then I was later promoted, and I moved back home to Georgia, where I was a interactive video training instructor where I taught newly promoted and newly hired individuals how to process the SSI claims. Then later I became a supervisor in a very busy Metro Atlanta office. And because of my skill set, at the area director at that time says, hey, I want to pull you over because I need a second public affairs specialist. And I've been doing this ever since. So I'm hoping that I'll be able to provide just a general overview of the disability process, and then I'll highlight issues and concerns, especially for the blind community. And I'm going to go ahead and try to pull up my slideshow here. So just bear with me one moment here. I think I got it. And let me know if you can see it. There it is coming up. So do you have it?
Yes, it is visible. And because some of our participants today
Okay.
are visually impaired, I'm going to either ask if you want to read what's on the slides as you go, or I can help with that. You just let me know whatever's easiest for you.
Okay, I may have you to like read it because I'm usually paraphrasing. So if that's because you know what you do for your individuals, so I'll pause and allow you to do that.
Sure.
Okay, and with that,
I'll
we'll go
start.
ahead and get started then.
Perfect with a verbatim. So the first slide, oh, backing up one. Let's the intro slide reads Social Security with you through life's journey. and includes photos of families, kids, seniors, people with disabilities, and the Social Security Administration's logo, and go digital. How to get help from the Social Security Administration. On the slide reads, to ensure the best service, customers must make an appointment. To save yourself a trip, if you cannot use our website, call 1-800-772-1213 Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m., or your local Social Security office for help. We will provide service by phone or schedule an appointment if necessary. If you are deaf or hard of hearing, please use our TTY number, 1-800-325-0778, or ssa.gov/appointment online.
Yes, ma'am. And that 800 number, that 1-800-772-1213, that is our national 800 number service. So if you ever get overwhelmed, you can always call that number, or you can have somebody to assist you to look up the local office's number to be able to assist you in getting some help from Social Security. We do have a new feature now with our agency, and it is our 24-hour automated service. When you call the local Social Security office number, then using your voice, you can tell the system what you want to do, such as if you ever need a proof of income letter. Sometimes people call that an award letter. You're going to ask for that and then follow the verbal prompts, and it'll verify your address. And once it gets to the end, it'll let you know you have completed that task. And then the letter will be mailed to you in 10 to 14 business days. Before I go on, something I want to highlight for individuals who may have low vision. If ever, when you're taking or filing a claim with Social Security and the technician is asking you how to receive your letters from Social Security, please remember you have the options or asking for Braille. You can ask for just a regular letter. And we have a feature where you can ask that someone from Social Security calls you and reads you the letter in addition to it being mailed out to you. I don't think a lot of people are aware of that we do have that option. You just have to ask for it because normally in the process where they're going to ask you this is where somebody's going to ask you what is your language preference for any letters or materials that you may get from Social Security. But other things that you can do via the automated service, like I just said, proof of income letter, award notice, the SSA 1099, request replacement Medicare, request replacement Medicare card. You can do change of address. And then additional or informational messages such as payment date, delivery, the payment delivery date, COLA, cost of living increase, so that you can get that information. And like I said, you just have to hit those verbal prompts where it says, say what you need next. Example, proof of income. And then note the proof of income letters will be mailed and received within 7 to 10 business days. So did I do okay for trying to read that? Okay, got
Awesome.
it. Okay. Now, with the next slide I have come up, it talks about our two different types of disability programs. Social Security has two programs. The first is under the Title II of the provision of the law, which is the SSDI. That stands for Social Security Disability Insurance. With this one, this is where you've worked, you've paid into it. I tell people it's like insurance because when you're paying in, as long as you're paying into it and you meet the minimum qualification, you are insured, you're covered. But when you stop paying in, then that coverage can lapse and you may not be insured for that program. But that is something that we can look into for you. The other program that is on the screen is called the Title 16 program, and that is the Supplemental Security Income, the federal needs-based program. And this is where, in order to qualify for this program, an individual's income and resources has to be below a certain threshold in order for them to qualify for a potential benefit. Under the Title II or the SSDI program, if you are approved for Social Security disability, the SSDI, after you have been on the rolls for 24 months, then Medicare is added on. under the SSI program, as long as you are eligible and we can pay you at least $1 in benefits, then you qualify for Medicaid through the states. Okay, we're going to go to our next slide. Okay, and the next slide talks about when should I apply for disability benefits. Number one, as soon as you become disabled, first thing you want to do is contact Social Security so you can establish that appointment for yourself, also known as a protective filing, so that we know how far back to look at when was the first point that you contact Social Security to start the process. The next bullet here talks about that processing an application for disability benefits can take approximately 12 to 18 months. Unfortunately, ever since the pandemic, there has been an increase in the processing time for these disability claims. And right now, the average for Georgia is between 12 to 18 months. So it is very important, as soon as you even think you're disabled, go ahead and call us and get that protective filing for yourself. The last bullet on the slide here talks about that we may be able to process your application faster if you help us by getting any other information we need. So, of course, if you have available any medical records or evidence, by all means, yes, we will take it from you. But what I'm telling you today is do not delay the process trying to get it for us, because throughout the disability process, we will ask you about what doctors did you go to, what hospitals, what other facilities that you went to, and then we're going to get you to sign a medical release for us. So in the event you do not have those medical records, we can send that medical release and get them to release those based upon your signature and your authority saying it's okay for Social Security to have those for you. Next slide. Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI. What is it? SSDI provides a monthly benefit to people who are no longer able to work because of a significant disabling conditions. SSA does not pay partial or temporary disability benefits. Who is it for? It is for people who cannot perform substantial work activity and may qualify if they have medical conditions that is expected to last at least 12 months or result in death. And that is the general definition for disability according to Social Security Administration. And of course, whatever issue that you may have or the disability that you may have, you're going to tell us what specific issue you have. And then when your case goes over to the Disability Determination Service, they're going to look at that criteria to see, do you meet that? The next bullet talks about if you are younger than your full retirement age, FRA, and earn less than the substantial gainful activity amount, the SGA limit, that's going to be who this benefit is potentially for. And then the last bullet talks about have recent work and a certain number of work credits based on age. And at the bottom of the slide, again, it is our web address at ssa.gov/disability for additional information on disability. But again, the general definition for disability is that a person must have a disabling condition that is expected to last 12 months or longer, or could possibly result in the death of that individual. That's where we, inside the agency, that's where we start for you. So let's take a look at our next slide. Substantial gainful activity, SGA. And I got this straight from our webpage for you. And it says that we use the term substantial gainful activity, SGA, to describe a level of work activity and earnings that is both substantial and gainful. SGA involves performance of significant physical or mental activities or a combination of both. For your work activity to be substantial, you do not need to work full time. Work activity performed on a part-time basis may also be SGA. And if your impairment is anything other than blindness, earnings averaging over $1,690 per month, or for a blind individual, it is $2,830 for blind individuals for the year 2026, generally demonstrates SGA. And we do not use SGA as a factor for determining initial eligibility for SSI if you are blind. Our next slide here talks about substantial gainful activity, again, SGA. And gainful work activity is work performed for pay or profit, work of a nature generally performed for pay or profit. And then the last bullet says work intended for profit, whether or not a profit is realized. And at the bottom, again, I'm just highlighting the 2026 SGA limit for blind individuals, which is $2,830. So just, we want to be aware of this because that SGA amount, that's going to be involved, especially if you're applying for Social Security disability insurance. Another thing I want to highlight is that whenever you contact Social Security to apply for SSDI, that Social Security disability insurance, we also take an application for supplemental security income, SSI, the needs-based program. And many people may not qualify because they don't meet that minimum threshold. So don't get upset if very quickly you get a letter that says you are denied. What I want you to do is look at or have somebody to read to you the top of that letter so you'll know which program did the letter generate from. Was it SSDI or was it SSI? Because if it was a SSI letter and we're saying that you did not meet the criteria there, we're still going to send your application over for the SSDI as long as you meet the criteria. So let's take a look at the next slide here. Again, we're going to talk about the definition of a disability for an adult. The Social Security Act defines disability as a person who cannot work due to a severe medical condition that has lasted or is expected to last at least 1 year or result in the death, or the person's medical condition must prevent him or her from doing substantial gainful employment, work that he or she did in the past, and it must prevent the person from adjusting to other work. Because with our disability determination service, because they are the ones who are going to make the medical decision, I tell people that not only does Social Security look at what type of work you did in the past, we're also going to be looking at what other types of work can you perform by asking questions about your education level, the types of work that you did, because there's an extensive work report that would come along with that to determine can you work at all is one of the things that they would be looking at for an individual. And I'm going to go to the next slide. And some requirements for getting disability benefits. To be eligible for disability benefits, you got to make 2 different earnings tests. Here I'm talking about Social Security Disability Insurance, SSDI. The first bullet talks about a recent work test. Generally, Social Security requires that a person must have 20 current quarters of work, meaning that out of the last 10 years, the most current 10 years, you have worked 5 out of those 10 years. So we're looking to see, do you have those 20 quarters of coverage? And then the second part of that is the duration of work, looking at how long have you worked to ensure that you do have the sufficient numbers of quarters. Then there is a note here on the screen that talks about certain blind workers have to meet only the duration of work test, meaning we're just going to look to see how long did you work to get enough quarters of coverage to be eligible for the Social Security disability insurance. Also, keep in mind that if you are a younger worker, someone who is younger than age 23, then you may not necessarily need to have 20 quarters of coverage because it will be less than that because you are a younger worker. And that will let us know whether or not you are insured. We're going to go to the next slide. SSDI. So what happens next? And your application will be reviewed to make sure you meet some basic requirements for disability benefits. We will check whether you worked enough years to qualify and evaluate any current work activity. And if you meet these requirements, the next thing we do is forward your case to the Disability Determination Service or office in your state. And like I said, the DDS, or the Disability Determination Service, they are the state agency that makes the medical decision based on the alleged condition that you may have, that they're going to look at all of the medical stuff for Social Security, because we're going to make sure that you meet the requirements, that you have current quarters of coverage, and that you are insured, that we can send the case over for further processing. Let's take a look at the next slide here. And like I said earlier, when we take the application for the Social Security Disability Insurance, we also take an application for Supplemental Security Insurance, or SSI, or income. The SSI program, the Supplemental Security Income, the federal needs-based program. So what is it? Again, SSI is a federal program that provides monthly payments to people who have limited income and few resources with little or no work history. Who is it for? People who are age 65 or older, as well as those of any age, including children who are blind or have disabilities. And this was a program, I believe, that in the early 70s, the federal government took this over from the different states and then developed it into the Supplemental Security Income Program. And where the funding comes from the SSI program is the General Tax Fund. Under SSDI, that money, when it's paid out, comes from the Disability Trust Fund. And under the needs-based program, Congress requires that Social Security does a lot of kind of reviews in terms of how we are spending the money out of the General Tax Fund. So this next slide here talks about Supplemental Security Income, SSI. The maximum monthly benefit for 2026 is $994 a month. If someone gets approved, that is the maximum that we can pay an individual. Benefits paid are paid on the first day of the month. If the first falls on a weekend or a holiday, then we back your payment up to the last business day in the prior month. The next bullet states that SSI recipients are eligible for Medicaid based on the residence address shown on their SSI record. And there's a note here on the screen that Medicaid is administered by each state and coverage does vary. Social Security employees are unable to provide information about Medicaid coverage, and you would have to contact your state agency for additional information. So I believe if you had questions about the Medicaid, you would either talk to, I want to say, is go through Georgia Gateway to see what your coverage is through them once you get notified that you do have the coverage. So let's look at the next slide here. Now, eligibility factors for SSI benefits. First bullet talks about income, wages, Social Security benefits, and pension. Income also includes such things as food and shelter, because this is a needs-based program, we're going to be looking at what type of money that you have coming in to make sure that you are below income levels. Also, to make sure that you do not exceed, because if your income is greater than what the federal benefit rate would be, that $994, an individual would not necessarily qualify for SSI. Resources, the next bullet talks about things that you own, such as real estate, bank accounts, cash, stocks, and bonds includes. And that's going to be with the resource limit. For an individual, you cannot have resources that exceed $2,000 a month. For a couple, the resource limit is $3,000 a month. And of course, there may be things that we can exclude as we go through the application, asking certain questions to see what we cannot count for the individual. And then the last bullet here is, where do you live? You must live in the U.S. or the Northern Mariana Islands. And if you are not a U.S. citizen, but you are lawfully residing in the United States, you may be able to get SSI, because depending on what provision of the law that an individual comes into the United States, they may qualify for SSI for a limited time period. That time period is 7 years. That allows them the opportunity to then try to get themselves either becoming a U.S. citizen, or someone would have to sponsor them, such as a spouse who has enough court credits that they could then borrow, so to speak, their work credits to be eligible for the program. But we would look into that and then advise them on what they would need to do once that situation comes up. But after the 7 years, if a person has not become a U.S. citizen, then their SSI, it would terminate, and then they would have to become a U.S. citizen in order to then reapply for that benefit. So let's look at the next slide here. Talking about the income for SSI, it is divided into two categories. On the left, we have the earned income, income that you're actively working for, such as wages, working somewhere. If you're self-employed, then we're going to look at those net earnings from self-employment. And then, of course, if someone is working under a sheltered workshop, when someone is working and they are receiving what we call earned income, we at Social Security, we can apply a $65 earned income exclusion to those wages. Also, it is important to point out that under the SSI, the needs-based program, we count that money or those wages when they are received. So when you get your wages, we're going to subtract, because it is earned income, the first $65 of earnings. Whatever is left, we divide it in half, and then we only count half of that. And what is great for individuals who fall up under being under the blind provisions, then after that, any blind exclusions for somebody receiving SSI, we then can deduct those after we've divided that money in half. Then we look to see what is left, subtracting that from the federal benefit rate, and whatever's the difference that determines what that person would get paid for the month. And I know that's a lot. And if I need to, I can highlight a formula that we have and ship that and email that back to you if you all would need that. The other type of income that we have here on the screen is called unearned income. This is going to be any income that you are not actively working for, but you're getting. Some examples of this is SSA benefits, VA benefits, unemployment benefits, interest, pensions, cash from family and friends, child support, and then some type of foster care payments that an individual may receive. Under the unearned income, we are only allowed to subtract from it the first $20. So if someone has unearned income, we subtract the first $20 from whatever they're getting in unearned income, and then after that, we have to count everything else dollar for dollar. In the event that somebody does not have unearned income, that general $20 exclusion, we can also apply that to the earned income, meaning that we can take the first $20 off of whatever they're getting in earned income, then we can apply the $65 earned income exclusion. Whatever is left, we divide it in half, and the remainder is what we count as countable income for SSI for that month. Again, I know this is a lot, and I will send the formula over if it helps you. So let's take a look at our next slide here. Okay, with resources. Again, on this slide, we have two columns here. The first talks about included resources, things that we have to look at. When you do file the application for Supplemental Security Income, SSI, the needs-based program, one of the things we ask in that application at the beginning is we ask for your permission to run a program against your Social Security number to see, are there any bank accounts out there in your name. If an individual refuses, then that could be immediate grounds for a denial for the needs-based program. But what we're going to be looking to see is, do you have any money in bank accounts such as CDs or IRAs, stocks, bonds, 401ks, any liquid assets that you may have. We look to see, do you have a second car that we may have to count? Because the first vehicle that you have, we can exclude it. We look to see if you have any life insurance. And when we're looking at that life insurance policy, we would be determining whether or not it is a whole life policy where we would have to count the cash surrender value, or is it a term life policy? And then any property that you have that you're not actively living on, we have to count that as well. The things that we do not count in the next column is the excluded resources. This is going to be the house that you live in. We don't count that. We don't count that first car that you may have. Burial plots for yourself and your family, we can exclude that. The next bullet talks about some resources set aside for burial. The first $1,500 in that account, we can exclude $1,500 if you have a burial account set aside for yourself. And of course, if anyone has an able account here in Georgia, I believe it's up to $100,000, that if it is set aside in an appropriate able account, then we can exclude that as well. But just remember, the income and the resource limits is going to be $2,000 for an individual or $3,000 for a couple. Let's take a look at our next slide here. Living arrangements. On this slide, it says that living arrangements are another factor to determine how much SSI a person can get. Benefits may vary depending on where you live. So if you're living in, the first bullet here says somebody else's house, we call that living in the household of another. We're going to ask questions to determine, are you contributing? Are you giving them anything? Because if you're telling us, no, you're not helping to pay any bills there, then that your SSI benefit, it would be a reduced amount because you're not contributing into that household. The next bullet here talks about in an institution, such as a hospital, a rehab facility, or nursing home. And generally, the maximum that you can get when you're living in one of those situations is the max we can pay is the $30 per month. And that if Medicaid is paying more than 50% of somebody's stay in that facility. And then the last bullet talks about that if a person is living in a group care or board, in a group care or board and care facility, because depending on the type of facility, then we're going to ask them additional questions to see where we start with how much is the potential benefit, and then taking any deductions from there for the potential benefit that you may get. I tell people that with SSI, we're nosy. We're going to get all up in your business. So you just have to be prepared for that, because again, we're spending everybody's money, because this is money that's coming out of the general tax base. So we have to give a good account for it. This next slide here talks about the SSI special rule for blind work. And there is a special rule to help people who work and receive SSI based on blindness. This rule allows a blind person to exclude from their earned income all expenses that enable the person to work. The expense does not need to be related to the blindness. The next slide here states SSI special rules for blind work examples. Expenses that can qualify include a service animal, including the cost of food and upkeep. The next bullet is transportation to and from work. The next bullet, licenses, fees, taxes can be deducted. And then the final bullet is, I think there's another page. So the next bullet is attendant care and services. Yes, more. You can also exclude on the very next page, the next slide here, it talks about meals eaten during work. You can have those excluded. The next bullet is medical and non-medical equipment or supplies. And the final bullet here is other work-related equipment or services. So for an individual who gets blind work I guess, excuse me, blind work exemptions. We call those sometimes, if you're talking to somebody, we may call them BWEs. With those, it's very generous for the blind community and the things that we can subtract from that SSI when we're counting to see how much you could potentially get. The next slide here talks about our Disability Determination Service Office, or the state office. The first bullet states that this state agency completes the initial disability determination for us. The second bullet states that doctors and disability specialists in the state agency ask your doctors for information about your conditions, and they consider all the facts in your case. And the last bullet here talks about that they'll use the medical evidence from your doctors, hospitals, clinics, or institutions where you've been treated. Okay, so once we get past the first hurdle here, where we've taken that application in the office for the Social Security Disability Insurance and that SSI claim, and once we've determined that, we're just going to say, for example, that you qualify for both, and now your case is going over to the Disability Determination Service. First thing that they're going to do is stage the case, and then once it gets assigned to an examiner, first thing they're going to look to see is, do you have enough medical evidence in that file to make a decision to say, yes, you are disabled according to Social Security's rules. So they're going to look to see, do you have enough evidence? And that's why I tell people, if you have that medical evidence for us, that is great. But if you don't waste time holding your case back trying to get it. Send us whatever you have. Tell us who you saw, and we'll help you to get the rest. Now, as they are then reaching out to all of your medical sources, and then your medical evidence starts to come in. Once they have gotten everything, then they're going to go back, review your medical evidence to see, do you meet the definition of disability based upon whatever condition that you are alleging? So saying that, if you're saying that you have low vision or that you are blind, they're going to look at those rules within the SSA Blue Book, and I'll talk about that in just a few moments, to see, does everything that you state and what the doctors have provided, is it within the parameters to say, yes, you are disabled according to Social Security's rules. They'll make a decision. If they come back and say, no, you are not disabled according to our rules, what will happen is you're going to get a letter in the mail saying that this is I believe it's the language is disapproved claim. When you get that letter, be sure to read it, because it has in the letter what we call is appeal language for you, meaning that from the date of that letter, if you disagree with that decision, you need to file an appeal. The next level, because that was the initial claim, the next level will be a request for a reconsideration. When you complete the appropriate forms, and I'll mention those in a few minutes, then what will happen, you'll send that back, and if anything is changed, you send us any updated evidence. We'll take all of that in. We will load the reconsideration request, and that way we send your case back to the Disability Determination Service. And what happens once we do that is that now a different set of doctors, a different set of examiners will review that case, because they are going to look to see, did the first group get it correct? Meaning, do they agree with them saying you are not disabled according to Social Security's rules? Or are they going to say, nope, the first group got it wrong, they missed something, yes, you are disabled according to Social Security's rules. Now, if they come back and say they agree with the first group saying you are not disabled according to Social Security's rules, again, what happens is we will send a letter out. When we send that letter out, then again, please pay attention to it, because it will have your appeal rights in that, giving you another 60 days to say, I do not agree with this decision. This time, you're going to take your case up to the administrative law judge, because you want to have a hearing. You're going to complete the paperwork for the hearing. Also, let us know if anything has changed and provide any new information. This time, we will process and put on the case that you have an appeal pending, and we send it up to the hearings office. And then at that point, once they go through it, and then they get you scheduled for a hearing. And if you go through all of this process and it turns out that you are indeed disabled because you followed that process, then we go back to when you initially contacted us to look to see what was your protective filing date, and that is what we pay you back to. And remember, under Social Security disability insurance, for whatever reason, Congress decided that a person can take care of themselves for the first 5 months that they're disabled. So Social Security disability does not pay for the first 5 months that you are disabled. So starting in that 6th month, that's where you begin to start to get paid your benefit. Under the SSI needs-based program, if you are found to be disabled, the SSI program does not pay a cash benefit for the month that you filed in, but you can get the medical, such as the Medicaid for that month. And then the next month, it starts paying for that month. And I know I'm probably talking a little bit ahead. I get excited when I do these presentations, but let's take a look at the next slide. So it here is basically what it's talking about, how it's going to work. So what the disability determination service is going to look at, or it says, how is a disability determination made? It is a 5-step process. Number one, they're going to look to see, are you working? Because if you're working, they're going to look to see for individuals, if they're not alleging blindness, they're going to look to see, are they earning above the SGA amount? If they are a blind individual, they're going to be looking at the SGA amount for the blind individual when we're talking about filing for SSDI. The next thing that we're going to look to see is your medical condition, is it severe? Meaning they're going to be going through your medical evidence to see what is the doctor saying about you. And just on a personal note, please be aware of what is in your medical files. Make sure you know what your doctors are saying about you. When I was a claims representative, I had someone sitting across the desk from me wanting to file a disability application, and she slams this paper down on my desk and says, "I'm disabled. The doctor said so." When I read the letter, I looked at her and I said, "Ma'am, are you sure you want me to put this in your file?" She says, "Yes, he said I was disabled." She didn't read the letter. He said she wasn't disabled, and the doctor was very emphatic in saying that he thought she was faking. So, of course, she was denied. So, I'm telling you, make sure you are aware of what is in your file. And because I was trying to give it back to her, I'm like, "Are you sure?" I said, "Don't you want to look at this?" No, he said, I said, okay. I made a copy of it and I put it in her file because she was insistent. But know what your doctors are saying about you. And even though they may be verbalizing one thing about you, make sure you know what they are writing about you, because they may be telling you what you want to hear in the office, and then they're putting something totally different in your medical files. So just be aware of that. So make sure that your medical condition is severe. Third bullet point here says, does your impairment meet the meet or medically equal a listing? Meaning that we're going to be they look at the blue book. And that is a book with all of the conditions, telling them what the minimum criteria that they need to look for to see, do you meet the disabled criteria? They're looking to see, do you meet that? And then next, they're going to be looking at is, can you do what you did before? Can you do the type of work you did before? And then the last bullet, number 5 here, talks about, can you do any other type of work? So they're going to be looking to see, can you do what you did before, or can you work at all? And I don't know if you all assist or service any veterans, because that is a big thing for them, because a lot of veterans are able to get VA benefit or VA compensation, and the VA provides a benefit based on a percentage of how disabled they are. Social Security, we don't do that. We are looking at, it is a all or nothing thing with us. You have to be 100% disabled in order to get the benefit from Social Security. So a lot of times, a lot of veterans will get upset with the agency, said, but VA says I'm 70%. And we're like, yes, we understand that. But with Social Security, it is, you got to be totally disabled or you don't get anything. And then they're going to be looking, like I said, at your education. Do you have any degrees? What type of work you did, how much you can lift, pick up, bend, how far can you walk, because they're going to be looking at the totality of everything. And I also emphasize to people, don't just tell us about the one big thing that is your disability. Tell us about everything. So even if you're saying, I have low blindness, but if you have diabetes, tell me about that too. If you have a heart condition, tell me about that too. Tell me everything so that you paint a complete picture for whoever it is that is reviewing your medical evidence, so that they can make a decision based on everything that is going on with you. So let's take a look at our next slide here. Okay, Blue Book, here we go. Disability Evaluation under Social Security, also known as the Social Security Blue Book. First bullet provides physicians and other health professionals with an understanding of the disability programs administered by the Social Security Administration. The next bullet states it explains how each program works and provides information to help health professionals make sound and prompt determinations and decisions on disability claims. And the last bullet talks about lists specific criteria under which claimants who suffer from a disabling condition can qualify for Social Security disability benefits. And at the bottom, again, it's going to have our web address at ssa.gov/disability/professionals/blue book. Okay, so what I did was, as I went out to the Blue Book for us today, and I looked up where we would be looking at low vision or blindness. So if you were to go to our website, you want to make sure that you're looking under the 2.00 special senses and speech for an adult. This is where you're going to find the criteria for low vision and blindness. And some of the things that we have going on here and what it'll talk about and define for you is, number one, what are visual disorders? It will define and explain the criteria of having a visual disorder. The second step or bullet here, it talks about how do we define statutory blindness. The third bullet is what evidence is needed for statutory blindness for SSI, for the supplemental security income. The fourth bullet talks about what evidence is needed for statutory blindness for SSDI, what the criteria is. The fifth bullet is how do we measure the best corrected visual acuity. Bullet number 6, we talk about how do we measure visual fields, and I did flip to another slide to continue this. Bullet number 7, how do we determine your visual acuity efficiency, visual field efficiency, and visual efficiency. Bullet number 8, how do we determine your visual acuity impairment value, visual field impairment value, and visual impairment value. And then number 9, what are our requirements for an acceptable parameter? Okay. And like I said, I kind of got ahead here. Like I said, that is what they're going to be looking at by going by what is in the Blue Book, looking at your medical evidence to see, does it meet the criteria? And I did kind of peruse it, and it is very, anybody can see it, because there used to be, you could order it, but you can't order it anymore, but it is online for you to peruse through all of the different categories. And I think it's pretty plain language for someone to be able to read through that. And again, when I said, what do we do with our decision? Like I said, the state agency initially, they look to see, do you have any evidence in the file? Is it enough that they can say, yes, you meet the disability criteria? If not, then they go to gather all of this evidence from all of your medical sources. Once they have it all gathered, they look to see, again, is it enough that they can make a medical decisions and say, yes, this person is disabled. But if they go through and there's not enough evidence, one of the things that they can do for you, if say if they go through and or if they request something from a doctor and it's not clear that is leaning one way or another, they could possibly send you out to what we call as a consultative examination. If that happens, this is where the disability determination service will send you to one of our doctors for whatever condition that you are alleging. And when they send you to that doctor, they're going to be making an evaluation based upon the criteria that is in the blue book. So if you have vision issues, they may be sending you to a optician to look at your eyes, or depending on whatever the other issue is. What I tell people is to remember, when you go to this examination, this is not saying we're saying that you're disabled. We're not saying that that this doctor is going to prescribe something or going to treat you. They are only going to look to see what is the issue, and then they're going to take the appropriate test and then send the results over to the disability determination service so that they can add that into your file, and with the other evidence that they have, then make a decision for you. Again, you're only going to get two responses once they make a decision. It will either say, and let me just read straight here from the slide here, and this slide says that we'll tell you our decision. First bullet, when the state agency makes a determination on your case, we're going to send you a letter. Next bullet, if approved, the letter will show the amount of your benefit, when your payments start, and your reporting responsibilities. The last bullet talks about that if you are not approved, the letter will explain why and tell you how to appeal the determination if you don't agree with it. And that's going to be, like I said, they're going to send you a letter, and it's going to say either you are approved or it is disapproved. And also remember, you have the option to have us to read the letter to you if you elect to have that option for yourself. And like I said, the next slide here, and I've kind of mentioned this, talks about that if you disagree with the medical decision. So if you recently applied for Social Security disability or supplemental security income disability benefits and were denied for medical reasons, you have the right to file an appeal within 60 days of the date on your decision notice, the date on the letter. The first appeal is the reconsideration. This is where you want to make sure that we sent you out the SSA 561 requesting the reconsideration. If you're trying to go to the next level, the second appeal is the hearings request. This is where an SSA 501 is needed to complete in order to initiate the hearing process. Okay, but if you are approved, then what you need to know is, when do you get your money? So it says, if approved, benefits are paid on the following dates: disability adult child benefits, disability adult child benefits, survivors, retirement, and disability. The pay date is based on the worker's birth. So if a person's birthday, the first bullet is the 1st through the 10th, that is the second Wednesday of the month. The next bullet says the 11th through the 20th is the third Wednesday of the month. The next bullet is the 21st through the 31st is the fourth Wednesday of the month. The next bullet states that if drawing benefits before June 1st, 1997, paid on the third day of the month. And then the next bullet talks about start Medicare after receiving 24 Social Security disability checks. So we're saying that you have to be on Social Security disability for at least 24 months before you are automatically enrolled in Medicare. Payment dates, again, is going to be based upon the worker's date of birth, and depending on what day, that determines what Wednesday of the month you get your benefit. But if it's someone is getting supplemental security income down at the bottom, then your payment will always be on the first day of the month, and you receive Medicaid as long as we can pay at least $1 in benefits. So how do you apply for benefits? I know initially on the slide here it says that you can use online via your My Social Security account at ssa.gov/disability. But of course, in this instance, what I'm going to tell you all is to please call our national 800 number at 800-772-1213. That is available every day from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. in all time zones. And it's Monday through Friday to make an appointment at your local office so that you can have a claims specialist would then call you and then go through the process of the disability application with you. And please remember to encourage individuals that if they're going to have issues, to utilize the option of asking someone in SSA to call them and read that notice to them. And they would have to read it verbatim, word for word, everything through that is on the letter to provide them proper notice. So let's take a look at our next slide here. Okay, the next slide here talks about working while receiving benefits. First bullet, Social Security has special rules called work incentives that allow you to test your ability to work and to still receive monthly Social Security benefits. You can also get help with education, rehabilitation, and training that you may need to work. The next bullet states that if you do take a job or become self-employed, tell us about it right away. We need to know when you start or stop work and if there are any changes in your job duties, hours of work, or rate of pay. The last bullet talks about individuals receiving Social Security disability benefits and their representative pay, and their representative payee must report their wages. Wages can be reported using their personal My Social Security account online. The last bullet here is just stating that if you have someone who is approved getting benefits and for whatever reason they needed someone to manage their benefits for them, so that representative payee can use their My Social Security account, log in, and then report those wages under the disability for this individual, because not only would they be able to see their own Social Security information, but they'd be able to see information on the person that they are the representative payee for as well. Let's look at our next slide here. Okay, that's going to be the end of the slides, but I'm going to pull up something very quickly. I want to pull up your email and just go back and address a couple of questions that you had, if you don't mind.
And
okay.
There was one slide that was a little bit fuzzy. It looked like it was an overlay of two of them. It was the slide with the contact information on it.
Oh,
about
and it may
four back.
That one?
There, that one. Yeah, let's leave that up for a minute just so that we're getting in that.
Okay. Okay, and again, this slide says, how do you apply for disability benefits? First up, it talks about online at ssa.gov/disability. And then the next bullet below it states to call our national 800 number at 1-800-772-1213, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday to make an appointment at your local office. And I'll have to go back and look at that from our what was sent down from our central office to see if it was an overlay on that slide. But while I have you here, I wanted to go back and just address some of the questions that you sent me. First question that you sent out to me was, what reasonable accommodations, including non-computer based options, are available to help someone who lacks computer skills and or cell phone to complete their login or ID me process to access the ssa.gov website. Um, I think initially you sent this or you raised this question with me, and I have sent this up to our central office, and I am awaiting a response on that. But currently, what we do have in place is the option of contacting your local servicing SSA office using the automated service if you need to conduct simple transactions or speaking with with a specialist who's answering the phone, and then they can walk you through whatever it is that you may need. And that's going to be the option for the moment now.
Okay.
Okay. The next question you asked, the second question was, what is the process for correcting a data entry mistake that overstates a blind SSI recipient's monthly earnings by $2,000 in 1 month during the trial work period? Um, First of all, I have a couple of questions on this because with SSI, they can work. And so it's not necessarily a trial work period because the trial work period is going to be available for someone for Social Security disability insurance. What I'm going to say is that if you have someone and their earnings are incorrect, number one, always send in those pay stubs, something that we can verify when they got the income. Because remember, with Social Security disability insurance, we count that when it is earned versus SSI, the needs-based program, we're going to count it when it is received. And in order for us to really get it right, we need those pay stubs. I'm just going to be honest with, we need those pay stubs. But once we figure out a way for these individuals to be able to have access to their My SSA account, they can also input their earnings for disability. Also, I want to highlight that when someone is requesting a trial work period, the first thing they need to do is to contact Social Security first. I'm going to minimize what I'm looking at. First thing they need to do is contact Social Security first, because if they go out and they start working under Social Security disability and those earnings exceed the SGA limit for a blind individual, that is going to trigger what we call is a continuing disability review, also known as a CDR. When that happens, because we're going to be like, ooh, this person, they're back to normal, is what we're going to be thinking, and it will stop their benefit. So tell us that they're going to go back to work before they actually start working. Because what happens with this trial work period, they get to attempt to work for 9 months, and it is not consecutive months, but it's for a limited time amount of time that I think it's up to 5 years where they can try to work. And what this does is, because we have it documented, we're seeing how much are those earnings are, but also it allows them to continue to receive that disability payment. So in the event that, it is unsuccessful, they're not having to go through trying to get an expedited reinstatement or going through some other things, because then we're going to know this is just an unsuccessful work attempt, continue the benefits. So does that make sense?
It does. And I think having a clear sense of who to call and what the magic words to say are at the
Okay.
beginning of that process is important, in part because a lot in this day and age, very few of us are getting a W-2 pay stub, right? Most folks, maybe their whole careers or certainly their early work experience, stepping stone jobs tend to be on some sort of a contract basis. And
Mm-hmm.
so the
So, but even
documentation is
if they're getting a 1099 for the year, we still need that 1099. But the magic word to contact the local servicing office versus the 800 number to report. And I'm gonna tell you why. If you call the national 800 number to report this, they're gonna send a message to the local office that may trickle down. Contact the local office, and the magic words is trial work period. I have somebody who's attempting to go back to work, and they're getting disability, so that triggers to everybody trial work period, so that way the benefits are not reduced. So does that help?
It does. And there's so
Okay.
knowing there's a difference,
Yes. I'm
targeting the
going to
right
tell you.
office.
Yes. No, I'm going to tell you. Send it to the lowest level, meaning the field office. Contact them first, because even though you may want to call the national 800 number, by the time it gets down to them, it could have already triggered a CDR, and we don't want that for the individual. Contact the local office and tell them, I have this individual, or I'm reporting that I want to attempt to go back to work. Now, that is for Social Security disability insurance. Now, if you have someone who is receiving supplemental, I'm having a moment here, SSI, the needs based program, and say if they want to go back to school or something, again, they need to call the local office, because we have a program called a plan to achieve self support, where if they are trying to say work additional hours because they're trying to get, say, a certificate or something like that, that will allow them to exceed their earnings amount and not stop the SSI. um, oh, that way. And that's called a plan to achieve self support. But they have to be in some type of structured program where they're trying to come to a specific end, and there's a specific goal that they're trying to attain at the end of that, on that program. Let me go back and let me see your next question here. Okay, let's see. Got that. But that's going to be the main thing, because the main thing with both programs is going to be big on, we need either the 1099s or we need the pay stubs, because even if it's 1099s, then what they would do is take the 1099 for, say, that whole year or whatever they've gotten it for, but also they would be able to figure out how to break it down to a monthly amount to determine what the individual is making for the whole month. Okay, well, it's two more questions. The last of the initial questions is, what options are available for a person with a solid work history who suddenly went blind between the ages of 60 and 62? While hospitalized, the hospital staff filled out a Social Security and Medicare applications for the patient, mainly to get their hospital care paid for. The patient was approved and began receiving early retirement benefits, which are now insufficient for living expenses. And if the person currently receives Social Security retirement benefits, qualifies as a legal blind for SSDI, is there a way for the person to apply for the higher monthly amount that they would qualify under SSDI? Normally, when those individuals who are in the hospital, and if a hospital staffer is kind of helping them to file for Social Security, they should have filed for both, meaning SSDI, and if they started to receive their retirement, because in that situation, it sounds like they applied for both for that person, the SSDI, the disability application, and they filed for the retirement for that individual, because the person can start their retirement benefit as young as age 62, but it is a reduced benefit. If that is the case, as what happens, and that person started to receive that reduced Social Security retirement benefit, because they are younger than their full retirement age, that allows them to file that application for disability. So the disability application more than likely went on to the disability determination service, where they're making that disability decision for that person. Now, if it turns out that the person is approved for Social Security disability, then what we have to do is to go back and then adjust the payment, because I tell people the Social Security disability amount, in essence, it is what you would get at your full retirement age, but you're getting it early because you're no longer able to work, is what the disability payment is. So once they make a disability decision, and if it comes back as favorable or as an allowance, then we have to go back and adjust that benefit and then pay that person a little bit more. But just remember, if they're only getting the retirement benefit, they cannot get Medicare until they are age 65. But if they're getting a Social Security disability, once they have been on the disability rolls for 24 months, then they are automatically enrolled in Medicare. I think there was one more question on here. Let me go back up. Again, yeah, I think I covered this because you asked me to explain the procedural steps for the trial work period. The main thing about the trial work period, again, I'm going to tell you, if you have someone that you are working with and they are wanting to attempt to go back to work, call the local servicing Social Security office. Let me see if I can do something right quick for you. Let me see if I have a web page up. I want to just kind of walk you to show you where to identify where you would find. Are you still seeing my
Yes,
web
I am.
page?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So give me one. I want to go to the internet. Let me just get a clean page here. Okay, here we go. Let me just walk this over. Okay, so if you can see on the screen, this is what our web page would look like when you come here. So in order to find your local servicing Social Security office, the easiest way to do this is you're going to go to this page, scroll down to the bottom of the page, and you will see where it says support. Under the support column here is going to be the first column you're going to see. The items you're going to see under this column will be contact us, find an office, forms, publications, fraud report. So under the support column, look for find an office. When you hit the icon for find an office, there we go. Let's see. And it is taking a moment. Okay. Then it's going to say that you can either search by the address, city, state, or zip code. Just for giggles, I'm going to put in a local a zip code for the Gainesville, Georgia area, 30501. And when I do that, what it's going to pull up is number one, the closest office to that zip code. So you can just select the option to make an appointment. And then when you do that, then it's going to bring up the local office telephone number. So when I go to say I want to make an appointment, well, first it does something different. Let's go back. Okay. But what it's going to show, oh, here it is, directions, but it'll show you the office address, but also it gives you other offices that are close to you in the area that you should be able to click on this link. Oh, office information. I'm sorry, I didn't see it right there. I don't have on my glasses. I apologize for that. But then it gives you the office number, tells you the hours and the directions. Yeah, so down here, once you scroll down, you'll get the 800 number for the office. Every office has an 800 number. That is the local number that you want to use the automated service, but again, to speak with a representative so that they can assist you with saying, I got somebody who needs a trial work period, and be specific and say those words so there is no confusion about what you said.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Does that kind of help?
It does. It does. I want to open it up to anyone on the call who might have a question as well. If you'd like to unmute yourself or drop that in the chat, feel free. Or to
And I
talk
know
to
this,
me directly if you have my
yeah,
phone number, and I'll
yeah.
relay.
And I know this is a lot of information, but the main thing is that if you're going to go through the disability process, stay persistent, see it through to the end, because it just hurts me sometimes to see where individuals, they'll go through the initial claim, they may take it to the reconsideration level, and then if they give up and then they come back later on and then they want to file a new claim, but then they get approved, where if they had taken it to the next level, they would have gotten paid all the way back, because once you file that new claim, we can only go to the protective filing of the new claim.
I had a question.
Sure, go ahead, Manathia.
Hi, Jen. Um, I have a question about I received Social Security disability, and I plan on returning to work. So the first thing I should do is contact my local disability office and tell them that I am doing a trial work. What was the word again?
Trial work period.
I'm doing a trial work period. Okay. Once I tell them that, and let's just say hypothetically, I find a job. Um, the job wants to pay me, I'm just going to throw out a number, $5,000 a month. During that trial work period, what do I do? Go to my Social Security portal and upload a pay stub and put it there and say, hey, this is how much money I made this month. Is that deducted from the Social Security bill I get every month, or am I still in a trial period? Does the trial period protect me for 9 months? Help me understand how that works.
Okay, because once you indicate that you are interested in going back to work, that way we can initiate on your record that you are going to start a trial work period. Some of the things we're going to be asking about is who the employer is, what's your rate of pay, so that we can document and kind of put an estimate to see what you would be making. But it's also your responsibility to make sure that you are sending us those actual pay stubs, so that once we get those, we can put in the appropriate month. How much did you actually receive in that month for working? Because
And
that's
that's
going to
via
let.
the website that I do that, correct?
Right. And you can upload it through, that's what I'm saying. You can upload it through their website, because when you upload it there, it
Yeah.
sends us an alert to pull that information in. And also then we look at it and then determine whether or not this was a successful or a unsuccessful work attempt for that month. And then after 9 months, and like I said, it is not consecutive months, because you may work 1 month and something happens and you're not able to work, say, for 6 more months. That doesn't mean
Right.
that you've already used up 7 months. You've only used one.
Okay. So during that trial period, trial work period, how is the monthly um, pay from SSDI impacted? Is it impacted based on how much you make, or is it not impacted at all based on how much you make? For instance,
But
if I
remember,
bring home $5,000 or even $8,000 that month, does that impact the SSDI I get, or is there no impact?
but while you are in the trial work period and you are working, it is not going to impact the disability benefit while
Okay,
you're
that's what I was.
doing this. That's what I'm saying. And then after that is over, we would make a determination to see whether or not you would be able to go back to work successfully. And if so, then normally what will happen is we'll write you a letter letting you know that your disability will benefits will end. And normally they give you a 2 month grace period, and then they tell you when it's going to end.
Okay, so after the work period, if let's say I work for the whole 7 months or 9 months, and then, I report, hey, I'm still working, and this is how much I'm getting. That's when the disability benefits will terminate.
Well, like I said, at the end of it, as they look, and if the earnings are enough to sustain you and it is above probably whatever the SGA, and they look at some other factors, because I don't know all of the factors off of the top of my head, but you would get notice. It's not like we're just going to say, hey, we're stopping your benefit. We have to give you formal notice, like I said, in writing, or if you selected the option to have that notice sent to you another way via somebody's calling you, reading it to you, or if you're getting a braille notice. But we have to give you notice of the action that SSA is about to take.
Okay, so what if during that trial period, I worked for that 7 or 9 months, and then um, for some reason I stop working? Do I need to apply for SSDI all over again?
You
Or
need
how
to
does
tell us that you stop working, and that's another thing. If you stop, you got to tell us so we know when to say, because if you've only used up 7 of those 9 months, then there's a good possibility that it's not going to get terminated, because you contacted us timely, told us that you can't work anymore, and while you were going through the trial work period and you stopped, then your disability is going to continue. It's when individuals neglect to tell us and we don't know, and our thing is, okay, they went over this threshold. We've got an alert from IRS that this person is working. That is going to trigger what I call is that continuing disability review, where we then have to question the medical decision. And normally, while we're questioning that, we suspend benefits. Don't do it that way.
Okay.
don't, don't do it that way.
Okay, and I know in the presentation you did mention the itemization part where we're able, as a blind person, I do have a service animal and things like that that we can itemize. So what does that pertain to? I mean, how does that work?
That is for the supplemental security income, the needs-based program, when you're talking about itemizing all of your expenses.
Okay, so
And you
that
would
doesn't
only
apply
be
to
able to,
SSDI?
no,
No.
no,
Wow. Okay,
no,
I thought it would. I mean,
no.
hmm.
So it's all about which program you're under in determining which rules that we need to look at for any potential exclusions.
Okay, so if I'm SSDI and I go to work and I have a transportation issue because I can't
You
sit
have
or I don't drive, and then I have a service animal, none of that can be applied.
No, because under the SSDI program, we just have to look at the substantial gainful activity amount for a blind individual. That's going to be a determining factor, and that's why I'm saying if you think you're going to go back to work, please, please, please let us know before you do anything, because that's what I find is one of the biggest issues for individuals is they'll go and get themselves into something, not realizing how it is going to affect that disability payment, and then triggering the continuing disability review. And a lot of times we never hear from these individuals until the money stops. And they're like, "Oh, you stopped my check," and we're like, "Yes, we did, because you went to work and you didn't tell us." And it's all about letting us know so we can document everything accordingly for you.
Yeah, because it is a substantial need for a blind person to obtain employment because there are a lot of factors. There's a lot of money that goes into going back to work. And, because you don't drive and you have to pay for transportation, and that's a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I have a
Dr.
question.
Collins, do you have a question?
I do. Good afternoon. I have a quick question about SGA. When it comes to calculating on the blindness side of things with SGA, and either if it's not, if you don't qualify for being legally blind for SGA, what is determining the amount? Is it your net or your take home?
It's the gross amount.
Okay, all right. That's what I
It
thought.
is it's gross. And again, remember, if they're filing under Social Security disability, we're looking at when did they earn it also. And if they do not meet the criteria of being statutorily blind or low vision for our purposes, then the SGA amount drops down for everybody else. It would be that, I believe it's the 1690 versus the 28.
That's correct. Okay. And
Okay.
then while we're talking about that, um, when it comes to being legally blind, as for the SSA and the stipulations for that, when you do your initial application, you're saying you need to go off of what a regular individual would go by with SGA versus what you would substantially say what a blind person would be. So you need to go in saying, I'm just doing the regular SGA amount, correct?
Mm, I think you lost me with the questions, but is the person alleging blindness and they have blindness or low vision, and do they have the documentation so that we be able to kind of look at it and put it in the file so that way we would
Absolutely.
know? Yeah,
Absolutely. But the
had
cut and
that.
dry, it would have to be is not and I'm talking about my situation. It's not cut and dry in the beginning. It might look as if it's severe limitations versus legally blind if you're just
Gotcha.
looking. So
Eh,
you would have to do some digging. So that's why I'm trying to figure out what would be the SGA amount I need to go off of. Is it the regular, or would I just all the way say I'm just doing the blind?
I'm going to say the regular just to keep you out of trouble,
Okay,
if that makes sense.
it does.
Okay.
Mhm.
Yeah, and this is Janice, let me try to just kind of put that question into context. A lot of the folks that we work with, I'm an adjustment division loss counselor in my day job in counseling. Very often people have a progressive vision loss, right? So they had low vision for X number of years. Something changed, right? If you have retinitis pigmentosa or diabetic
Yes,
retinopathy, now, right? 5, 10 years
yes,
pass. Suddenly we went from being low vision to being no vision. And it sounds like that means to kind of uh, expound on what you were saying, Dr. Collins, that you're in a whole different category for financial analysis from Social Security's standpoint.
Yes.
But you will be interacting with them on multiple occasions with multiple sets of medical records in order to get to the place where they do know, yes, she's statutorily blind. And that SGA number goes up once you cross that threshold, but it's not once and
Right.
done at all.
Right.
Okay. That,
Sometimes it's you got to stay persistent with the process.
yes. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
And
Anyone?
Miss Janice, I hope that this was helpful. I
It
mean,
has been. It has
okay.
been. I wanted to see if there's anyone else who had a question. I saw a couple other people unmute themselves at different points and wanted to just invite questions. We may have already covered whatever was on your mind.
Sure. I have a quick question as well. I I'm currently just started working again and I've gotten very different information than what you presented today. Is there an appeals process if you feel that your office, your local office has not done a great job with your
You can
case?
But you can always file a reconsideration or a hearing. And remember, the reconsideration is first. Filing that request so that we can go back and take a look at it. But remember, if it's with regards to the medical evidence, then we have to send it back to the Disability Determination Service.
Okay, for me, I'm permanently blind, so it's not medical, it's related
Okay.
to other things. But
Oh,
so then
you
basically
can
you would
definitely No,
go ahead,
yes,
I'm
ma'am. But
sorry.
you can definitely file an appeal at and let us know that if you have a disagreement with whatever it is that we're saying, and then we take it through the appeals process, and then you get a formal notice on the decision.
Okay, that sounds good. Thank you.
And let me ask on the two forms that were the appeals process, is it possible to call a phone number and have somebody take that information from you over the phone if you do not have the ability to access SSA.gov?
Do you need the forms? Because I can find them and email them to you.
Sure. I mean, I thank you. But I've had clients tell me they did an appeal on the phone. And I'm now wondering if that has very often people think they've given notice. That's why I asked sort of about the magic words and whether some of these things are even things, whether they're viable, because a client who's not a computer user, whose vision loss, they've never dealt with Social Security, they're in their early 50s, their vision loss is still traumatic and brand new, and they don't have any trusted, family members or sighted assistants to deal with all this. Um, I wasn't sure if it is even humanly possible for her to have filed an appeal in a phone call.
Again, because you can file it in on a telephone call,
Okay.
again, because what they're going to let us know is that they have the vision issues such as low or blindness, and request for assistance in completing the appeal forms. And normally when they do that, I believe there's a process that, as we're taking this from them, and I believe we can attest that they are actually doing that as well.
Okay. That's great to know. But please do share the forms. I think having the
Okay.
link, that sounds like it may be a step that's one less thing we have to dig for, and that's always very helpful. Anyone else
Okay.
have any questions to bring while we have expertise in the house? This has been incredibly helpful, and it may be the beginning of more than one conversation if you're open to that,
Okay.
because it sounds like at least one of the topics that is a source of confusion is the difference between blind work expenses if you're on SSI, but
Hmm.
it sounds like there might be some business related expenses that people who are on SSDI might be able to write off. Or at least there's talk in the
There
work?
may be talk of it because I haven't heard anything trickle down to my level with that. And the way that happens for different groups is about having the right people advocating for you. And I'm just going to say it. You got to worry Congress, because until they write the provision of the law, we can't do a whole lot about it,
Okay,
if that makes sense.
understood.
So just to confirm, the number one thing that I got out of this is to call the local office and let them know that you plan to return to work, and not necessarily the 800 number to the National Security. Okay.
No, I would always encourage people to call the local office first, simply because of knowing the process, just me working on the back end. Because even though you may be talking to an agent at the 800 number and you saying, I want to file an appeal, they may send you the forms. But if you're talking to someone in the local office, depending on who's answering the phone that day, if you get a technician, somebody who processes the claim, and you're talking to them, more than likely they're going to help you with those forms and just get it done.
Okay, so if I call the local office here in Atlanta and tell them, hey, I'm going to go back to work, that's good enough.
Right, because what they'll do, because like I said, if you need assistance with that, and let me just say this, staffing with Social Security right now is at a all-time low. So when you call, let them know that you want to file a, a reconsideration or a hearing, or that you disagree with the decision that is on your case and you want to file an appeal. If they can't do it, because sometimes somebody can do it right then in that moment for you, but if they can't, they're going to help you to schedule an appointment. But again, it is going to be a protective filing, because it helps to protect you and what you're asking for.
Okay, for me, I have a severe disability. I just want to consider going back to work. But so for that phone call, I just have to tell them that, and that's it. I don't have to make come into the office and fill out paperwork. It's just a matter of a phone call. Correct?
They should be able to assist you on the telephone if you're saying that you're wanting to initiate a trial work period. But again, they're going to be asking you questions about, have you gotten hired from an employer? Who do you plan to work for? What is going to be your rate of pay? How many hours are you going to work? When do you expect to be paid? Because all of that is going to help us to do that initial documentation. And also they would remind you about reporting responsibilities and getting those pay stubs back into Social Security, such as you loading that information into your My Social Security account if you're able to do so.
Okay, so the best time to call them is when I actually have a job offer, because that information I'm not going to have. Right. So when I actually have a job, call and tell them that. Because if I'm going to tell my son to go back to work, the information I'm going to give them, they're going to ask those questions are not going to be actual. There probably would be something that I'd like to have. Like I said, how much are you paying to get now? I don't know. I don't have a job, but I plan on looking and going back. So that's just say $20 would be the answer. I mean, are they looking for cards? I mean, so I'm not sure how it would
Well, I'm going to tell you to contact us once you know that you have been offered that position,
Okay.
because you don't want to trigger anything unnecessarily. Once you know you have been offered that position, at that point, contact us so that we can then document what employer, rate of pay, how often you're going to get paid, and then they'll tell you about reporting responsibilities, and then they'll ask with regard to, are you able to upload that information via your My Social Security account.
Thank you. Thank you. I am so appreciative for the chance for us to be face to face and meet live with humans. I just can't say thank you enough. And yeah, Anise, if I'm also aware, do you work with the WIPA program, the Work Incentives Program?
No, I don't. You mean in Social Security?
Well, they're contracted. So there's one in each region here in Georgia. Bobby Dodd and Walton Options in Augusta have the WIPA contracts. We may be starting a series of conversations and invite some of them to talk in more
Mm-hmm.
detail about the ABLE accounts and some of the you mentioned in passing, but ways to put assets into a safe container and continue to work, save, and access benefits until right, you're at a place where you're able to take yourself to the next level. You've got medical
Right.
insurance through the job, and you don't need Medicare.
Right. But also remember the ABLE account applies to SSI, the needs-based program. So
Not got it.
got
So,
it. Got it.
which is why folks need to know which program they're receiving benefits from. That's really important.
And a quick question for you guys to ask people if they tell you that they're getting Social Security. My coworker and I, we just simply tell people, ask them when do they get their check. If they ever say the first of the month, you know it's always SSI. If they tell you some other day, then more than likely it's going to be disability or retirement. So
Understood.
okay.
Thank you. That's a nice shortcut. Okay. People do know when their check hits, even if they're not sure what flavor of money it is. Okay. I am going to wrap us up here and just say thank you so much. Seeing no other questions, I appreciate your time and your willingness and your expertise. And yeah, we will make the video available for folks who couldn't make it.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you
It's my
so much,
pleasure.
Ms. Norman. Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.